Miss Bradley,
Here.
Miss Caldwell Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Cody,
Here.
Miss Della Gardell,
Here.
Miss Sawyer.
Here.
Mr. Barron's here as well.
Thank you, Rob. If all guests of the board would mind identifying themselves, if you're not signed in by name into this Teams, just so that we can have the benefit of knowing who's in the room with us. I see that we have several staff signed in by name as well. If there's any staff on the line without signed in by name, that would be helpful too. Okay, well, hearing no one, and I actually don't see anybody in our chat right now that's without a name. So the first item of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Move approval, Caldwell Johnson.
Thank you.
Sawyer, second.
All right, we have a motion by Caldwell Johnson and a second by Sawyer. Please take the roll call vote.
Miss Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Miss Bradley,
Yes.
Miss Caldwell Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Miss Della Gardell,
Yes.
Miss Sawyer.
Yes.
Our vote is approved 7-0. The next item on our agenda is approval of our minutes for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. May I have a motion and a second to approve our minutes?
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Caldwell Johnson.
We have a motion by Anderson and a second by Caldwell Johnson. Please call the roll call vote.
Miss Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Miss Bradley,
Yes.
Miss Caldwell Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Cody,
Yes.
Miss Della Gardell,
Yes.
Miss Sawyer.
Yes.
The vote is approved 7-0. Dr. Ahart, I don't believe we have any district recognitions this evening. Is that correct?
You are correct.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go ahead and put your name in the chat, and Ms. Erin Jenkins will help me keep track of that. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid references to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We do appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with a speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Mr. Cody, I believe you have the consent motion.
I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $2,631,760.90, and procurement card transactions in the amount of $736,454.66.
Is there a second?
Second, Caldwell Johnson.
We have a motion by Mr. Cody and a second by Caldwell Johnson. Any discussion or questions for our consent items this evening?
Madam Chair, I did submit several questions to the superintendent regarding the personnel items,
Yes.
personnel recommendations that were included. And I'm hopeful that when the superintendent responds, he will include the full board in that response.
Yes, I think it came through this afternoon. I thought I saw it.
Oh, did it?
I
may have
believe
missed that.
so. Okay, I can
I
find
did
that.
respond. I did
Okay.
respond to everybody who's on the email, but I will resend it to the entire board.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahart. Any other questions or discussion regarding our consent items? All right, please go ahead and call the roll call vote.
Miss Anderson. Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Yes.
Miss Bradley.
Yes.
Miss Caldwell Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Cody.
Yes.
Miss Della Gardell.
Yes.
Miss Sawyer.
Yes.
All right, the consent items are approved 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item E1, our monitoring report, Black Males Third Grade Reading Part 3. Dr. Ahart, I will go ahead and turn this over to you for the presentation.
Thank you. We have Kelly Schofield, who's our elementary director of teaching and learning, and our executive director of teaching and learning, Noelle Nelson, here, and as well as our associate superintendent, Matt Smith. This was a particularly challenging report to put together, I think for obvious reasons. And we will have some challenges again moving forward, given our inability to have direct contact and regular classroom contact with our students. We have a lot of, this illustrates, I think, really precisely some of the challenges that we're trying to navigate with the current pandemic, and certainly is motivating all of us to figure out how do we most effectively use remote learning to teach something that really calls for that direct contact between the student and the teacher. These basic reading skills are paramount to the future success of these students and the future opportunities of these students. And as I've echoed in a number of meetings this week, 2 of them again today, to a larger community outside of DMPS, while compliance with changing guidelines from the state has its place, we really need to be focusing on how do we do everything in our power to recoup the lost opportunities that have been brought about because of the pandemic. So we received a few questions on the report, and thank you for those, board members. I'm going to share, or I'm going to mute and turn things over to Kelly and Noelle, and we'll walk through the presentation.
Hi, good evening. Noelle's going to pull up the presentation and we can get started. Thanks, Noelle. This is our board goal 2, part 3, third grade reading Black males. And this report focuses specifically on the progress monitoring of the students who are at risk and persistently at risk. So this report gives the percent of students that are being progress monitored that are required to be progress monitored. And this data from this report would have been pulled before we left on spring break. It does relate, it's a progress measure for our overall board goal 2, the percent of Black male third grade students on track in reading will increase from 35% to 72% by June 2023 as measured by FAST. Just a little background or context around the at-risk and persistently at-risk, because that directly relates to this board report, and that is from the guidance that we have gotten from the early literacy guidance from the Iowa Department of Ed, and they designate a student as being persistently at risk if that student has not met the grade level benchmark standard on 2 consecutive screenings. So that would give that student the persistently at-risk designation. An at-risk designation in reading would come if they did not meet the grade level benchmark in one of the 2 most recent screenings. So students have to meet that benchmark 2 consecutive times to come out of that at-risk or persistently at-risk designation. So these are the students who are required under ELI, the early literacy guidance, to be progress monitored. Those students that are persistently at risk are also required to receive an intervention. And this just goes into a little bit of that, that early literacy implementation guidance, talking about how often we need to assess. This also gives the guidance that students that are identified as persistently at risk are required to receive an intervention. We use progress monitoring to monitor their progress towards meeting those benchmarks. And although the students that are designated at risk aren't required to have an intervention, we certainly, the state strongly suggests it, and we also work with schools to provide interventions for those students as well. The measure that we use for first, second, and third grade students, which are the students that are shown in this board monitoring report, the measure we use is the CBM, or a curriculum-based measure reading. Sometimes you'll see it as CBMR, and that measure it measures the reading fluency, the rate and the accuracy of their reading fluency, and just a general, I guess, knowledge around curriculum-based measures. The reason that we use those types of measures is they're highly sensitive to growth over brief periods. So so being able to take a 4-week period or an 8-week period and use a curriculum-based measure such as this reading CBMR gives you better data for those short periods of time. So we use specific research-based measures to determine whether students are going to be on track to meeting benchmark. And those, I chose some graphics there just to kind of show you what that reading, fast reading measure would look like on the computer. It's a computer-based test. So there's a passage. The student has the passage in print in front of them, and the teacher has the passage and on the computer in front of he or she, and they would mark, they put the timer on for a minute, the student reads, they mark errors, and then they push, when the minute's over, they push stop, and then that'll generate the score for the student. And then the graphic on the left is just showing you some of the graphs that are available to teachers and for us at the district to use to determine whether a student is on track for meeting that the coming up screener or benchmark for that screener. So teachers are able to see their students' data. They can pull that up on FAST, and they're able to see the students' data and the aim line and see their progress towards that aim line. So as you can see, we definitely increased in all of the areas, that we are measuring for this report with first, second, and third grade students. Our first grade students increased. We were at 62.6% in the fall of students that were being progress monitored, that were required to be progress monitored, and that has increased by almost 20% to 82.2% in first grade. And then you can see in second and third, it's much higher. Our second grade students, Black male students, are being progress monitored at grade level at 94.3%, and our third grade students at 98.5%. And this particular measure, although our goal is 100%, we may not, it might not be possible for us to make that goal of 100% because we do have students that have significant disabilities that are on an alternate assessment that may not be progress monitored on a grade level progress monitoring. Now that's very few, so we should certainly be able to get up to the 98, 97%, but we do have a few students that aren't progress monitored on grade level, and this particular report and measure is based on students being progress monitored at their grade level. And then we have some other students that are perhaps students with IEPs or other disabilities that might be progress monitored off grade level or on a grade level measure, but not the CBM reading. So we're still working with teachers on ensuring that every student is progress monitored at the CBM on grade level, even if they're also progress monitoring them perhaps on another measure like sight word or phonemic awareness. So we'll continue to see that first grade move up as we continue to work with schools on ensuring that they are progress monitoring on that grade level CBM reading at least once a month for students, even if they're using a different measure. And that kind of gets into our response to this particular data set. We're working with schools, or we're working with schools intently before we left for spring break around that data literacy, around identifying the building leaders and coaches and interventionists being able to identify those students based on Tableau reports that should be progress monitored. So those students that are designated persistently at risk or at risk. So there's a report on Tableau that gives them that data. So we were working with them to compare that data to going into FAST to see which are those students actually being progress monitored, and are they being progress monitored regularly. So we were doing a series of kind of learning workshops with building leaders and coaches right before spring break, and we were going to continue those after spring break so that they could see how they could use the different reports to see, one, if the students are being progress monitored, and then using that data to project whether those students are, how many of those students are on track for making that benchmark at the screener, and then helping buildings like take that and action it, because that's where we really are trying to focus on is we can see the data, we know where to find it, and then what are we going to do about it? So helping them make some goals and set some things in place to action that data. Now we all know that kind of got stopped and we haven't been able to act on some of those plans that buildings put in place right before spring break to action that data. But we have since then in this kind of or digitally or virtually, I guess I should say, we have provided some the data. We've worked with the data department to provide some training Q&A workshops over Teams in this last couple of weeks for our elementary principals, and even for our middle school. We've been working with our middle school buildings on using some fast data and actioning that data to support students. So we have done some of that virtually, and thanks to the data department for partnering with us to do that. And then we continue to work with our schools on their master schedule so that we are sure that we're giving enough time to core instruction. And then how then do they give them that extra intervention, and how will that fit into the schedule? And then of course, professional learning. We have professional learning coming up. All K2 teachers will be participating in foundational skills training before the end of May, and that'll be K2 teachers, interventionists, and coaches. And then we have some other professional learning opportunities that we're looking at for possibly over the summer and into next fall. So I guess that opens it up for questions or discussion?
Yeah, before we do that, may I have a motion and a second to approve our item E1 before I open us up for discussion?
I move approval. This is Barron.
Second,
Bradley.
Anderson.
We have a motion by Barron and a second by Anderson. Now we can go ahead. Is there any discussion, or does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Cody.
The FAST and the CBM, whatever, measures fluency, but are we ever monitoring comprehension? I know it's tricky with K1, but in 2 and 3, is that part of the discussion?
We do. There is a way to monitor comprehension on the FAST. There's questions that you can ask to teachers to monitor the comprehension. That's not a measure that we have used district-wide for any or for this report, but there is a way to do that. And also MAP would be more of a comprehension measure. So those 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students also take MAP testing.
Okay. And my second question. Back in the Stone Age, before we got locked down, I met with a bunch of elementary teachers to talk about this reading series, not the series, the testing sequence and all of that. And one thing they were frustrated by was, and I understand that the FAST is mandated and everything, there's no way around it, but they didn't know how to use this data in their classrooms. They didn't know what to do when they saw it besides getting a kid monitored or whatever. So what would you say to a teacher who says, I don't know what to do with this data?
Well, I think that would be what we're trying to work on for this series of professional development for building leaders and coaches so that they are able to help those teachers. So it's really looking at each individual student and what assessment they're using or what data set they're looking at, where the student's discrepant. So if a student is not meeting the benchmark on a CBM, say in 3rd grade, then it could be that they're just disfluent and we need more practice for fluency. But it also could be that we need to drill down and see, is it a decoding issue? Do students have phonemic awareness? So being able to drill down through a series of assessments and get at the root cause of that, the reason that they're not meeting that benchmark, and then what research-based interventions would directly align to that skill deficit. So helping teachers understand what is the actual skill deficit, and then what intervention would help a student. How long should it be? How many students should be in that group? How significant? How far below grade level are they? What type of activities are we going to do, and how long do we need to do those? So it's really it's really getting at that root cause, and then helping teachers see what type of work to do to help that student and backfill that skill. And we are, and definitely going into next year, the plan was to really focused a lot on core instruction the last couple of years and getting that core instruction solid. But going into this next year, our plan was to really focus on interventions, types of interventions that meet specific skill deficits, and then helping train interventionists and teachers in how to provide those interventions.
Okay, thank you.
What other board members have questions or discussion?
So I have a few questions. With regards to the data too, how can you define this a little bit deeper for me? Do we know what percentage of the kids, and I was looking at the Tableau link or whatever, but what percentage are ELL students? What percentage are living in poverty? How do we define this down a little bit? So we identify that information.
So are you talking about the students that are being progress monitored? How many of them are in the different groups? Right.
Can you dive down into that data a little bit more?
I could get that to you. I don't have it in front of me. I know how many students have IEPs in that group because I was looking, had that data prepared in case, because some of these students may not be progress monitored on grade level because they have IEPs. So I do know that like 11% of our first graders are students that have IEPs. Now those aren't necessarily reading IEPs, but they have an IEP. And that's 11% of those Black males that are, right? That's 11% of Black males. That doesn't necessarily mean that all those students are being progress monitored. Right. So that we'd have to go into the individual FAST for schools and gather that information. I don't believe that at this time of the day the department has been breaking it down by student groups, but we certainly could do that. We could gather that data. Sometimes with the FAST, it's harder to gather data because we're going we have to go into those FAST reports and pull it from individual schools.
Okay, but could we tell? So at this point, you would not be able to pull Black males and say we know X percent have IEPs, X percent are ELL students.
Yes, we could. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay. And another question I had was just looking at our benchmarks from between moving through the grades from kindergarten 1, 2, 3. What happens in that second grade time frame? I mean, you see from kindergarten it kind of decreases, but it looks like a kind kind of a significant jump from 1 to 2. And then it comes back up again in 3rd grade. Is there, like, can you try and explain that? I'm looking at, it's the dashboard screenshot, and it's looking at 3rd grade is on top, and then it has grade 0, 1, 2.
So you're talking about the screenshot that shows the % of students that are being progress monitored?
Is that what that is?
It's Appendix A.
Okay.
Yes,
No, I don't think.
that's the students that are being progress monitored. So the reason that 2nd and 3rd grade have more students that are being progress monitored on grade level than 1st grade are showing is that 2nd and 3rd grade, the only measure that they have is the CBMR. So more teachers use that as the measure for to progress monitor students. In 1st grade, there's a suite of assessments that they could use to progress monitor. The CBMR is the grade level one that we're using for this monitoring report. But many teachers, because of when I was talking to Mr. Cody earlier about how they drill down, well, they realize that they're not fluent because they don't know sight words, or they're not fluent because they're not decoding. So they're providing an intervention in decoding and their progress monitoring with that measure, that decoding measure, the nonsense words. So that's what they're using routinely. But when we pull this report, we're only pulling those students that are being progress monitored with the CBM. So
I should clarify too. I was actually looking at Appendix A Goal 2. That actually is a measurement of percentage of kindergarten through 2nd grade Black male students meeting the FAST benchmark. So that's the benchmark data. And so
From
looking at right. So what can you tell me about that data and what happens between kind of that 1st, 2nd grade for that significant jump, and then they come back? They seem to be, numbers seem to be improving once they run into 3rd grade. So what can you tell me about that data?
Okay, so you're wondering what happens from when they leave kindergarten when they're high, right? Or that kindergarten data and why it drops, keeps dropping.
Right, and then it keeps dropping. And 2nd grade seems to be kind of that low, and then we come back up again. So what's happening?
Well, one thing that's happening from kindergarten, from 1st grade to 2nd grade, it is a different measure, right? So in 1st grade, you have a suite of assessments that you're giving students that are weighted. When you get to 2nd grade, the measure is just that CBMR fluency measure, right? So the measure is just a little bit different. So that's one thing that is happening. And that CBMR measure is a lot of different reading skills that they're having to put together to read that passage fluently within that minute. So what we have been focused on in our district is making sure that we work more on that fluency in 1st grade, because although they show that they have those skills, if you looked at their CBM measure in 1st grade, which is one of the suite of assessments, it's not always as high. So we really are trying to push that end of the year with our 1st graders to be reading in connected text and not just focusing on all those discrete skills. So that is one of the reasons why we in digging into the data that we feel like, and that could be different across schools. It's also really in 2nd and 3rd grade. It does start coming back up in 3rd grade somewhat, and we really focus on a lot of reading. So getting students into text in 2nd and 3rd grade, not just and students actually reading on grade level. So those are 2 things that we've really focused on in 2nd and 3rd grade. Is we typically read text, or a lot of times the teachers are reading the text to the students. We need the students to be reading the text and reading text on grade level.
Okay.
And Kelly, I know that one of the questions you asked was related to, because this is a Black males report, what is the breakdown within Black males for ELL, the various groups within that? And I did get notification from Mary that the reason we don't provide that and can't provide that is because of the small number of students in the N. So because of student privacy issues, it's such a small number, we don't provide that information publicly.
Okay, thank you. Right now, those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Hi, this is Terry, and I did have a couple of quick questions, and I appreciate you providing the context for why we don't have a better definition of sort of the universe. I feel like there have been reports in the past where we've had that information, but I have to assume that that's because we have a larger number represented in some of those other grades, so we do have the ability to provide that information. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think because we're talking about the Black males report specifically, if we look at it within just Black males and then start looking at what percentage are ELL, what percentage are free and reduced, what percentage, then that number shrinks significantly. If we're looking at all students, obviously that number is much larger.
Yeah, I don't know why I feel like there was at one point an opportunity where we did see a little deeper dive into sort of the underlying demographics within the subgroup. So maybe I am confusing that with something else we received at some point.
Well, I think this report too, that it's also just looking at students that are being progress monitored. So this isn't 100% of the Black males in first grade. So your number for your N is going to get smaller and smaller. So for other reports, we've been able to do that because we're looking at all students.
So I'm trying to just make sure that I'm clear on what's included in this report. So I go back to the first part of the presentation where you talk about at risk, persistently at risk. And that has to do with screening assessments. And then I go down to the data that you're providing, and this is the curriculum-based measure. And is the curriculum-based measure a subset of FAST?
The curriculum-based measure is one of the assessments on the FAST suite. So, in second and third grade, it's the only measure for ELA that we use. Second through all the way up through seventh grade, we're using the CBMR.
Okay, all right. So then, when I reflect back on at risk, persistently at risk, the only students that we have the data on are those that are identified at risk. Is that correct?
At risk or persistently at risk, yes.
Okay. So if we were to look at the rest of the universe, in other words, if we were to look at all Black males in the district, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, what does that look like?
As far as progress monitoring?
Correct.
So some students in the state requires that all students that are persistently at risk or at risk are progress monitored. So that's what this report's based on. But other students that don't meet the benchmark are progress monitored, and that's a school-based decision. Right? So we do that because it's the right thing to do, not because the state tells us that we have to do it. So any student that that didn't meet the benchmark or that a teacher is concerned about, they're able to progress monitor them and provide them interventions.
So if we were to consider all of those students in this report, what would the data look like?
I would think it's going to look about the same. It's not going to be much different on this particular Black male report. But I would have to go into, for that, I mean, I don't have that data, so I don't know. I just based on working with schools and looking at students that are being progress monitored. So I guess sometimes the teachers will progress monitor their whole class, right? Just because they want to keep a pulse on where they are. And that could be students that met the benchmark, that are above the benchmark. So it's really kind of hard to tell what you would gain from that if you weren't just looking at individual students and their score and then their trajectory on to meet that next benchmark or that next
right.
You could progress monitor a student that's actually above grade level if you wanted to.
Yeah, Terry,
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I kind of want to remind the board, since not everyone was involved in the goal setting process, and then the indicators of how are we going to monitor progress over time of these goals. So the data that we're presenting to you tonight is simply just the % of kids being progress monitored. That actually was our very first step, because we know we had such gaps in, if a student is showing at risk on a screener, are they even being progress monitored? And are we even intervening on them? We got to get that in place first. And then our desired state, hopefully the next time we report out on this progress measure, is not just simply what percentage of kids are being progress monitored. We want to know how, of the kids who are being progress monitored, who's making adequate progress. So I don't know if that's what you're actually asking, but that's really what we want to know. And we don't yet have the systems in place to answer that question, but that is our future progress measure beyond just who's being progress monitored. So this data point doesn't tell us a lot other than, are we doing the very basic thing of progress monitoring those who need it? And then the next question is, of those being progress monitors, who's actually responding to the interventions that we're putting in place? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think what I'm challenged by is what our goal actually reflects. And our goal doesn't reflect a subset. Our goal reflects the entire population. And so I'm just struggling with how best to contextualize this piece of data across the entire Black male population relative to the board goals. So that's where I'm challenged.
Right. And I think to Noelle's point, that these are the students that we know are at risk of not meeting those benchmarks. So these are the students that are receiving extra or interventions. So really what would be helpful is to know what % of those students are on track to make, we're on track to make spring. If we were back in school, that's what we would hope to be able to talk to you about is, based on schools. And when I talked earlier about working with those schools before spring break, that's what we were working with them on. What % of these students that you're progress monitoring and providing interventions are actually on track to make the spring goal, right? And using those graphs and charts to do that. So being able to say how many data points do they have above their aim line? Are they going to meet that spring benchmark? And if they're not, what are we going to do about it right now instead of waiting? So that's the work that we were doing before spring break. And we were hoping to have, just some at least anecdotal data to talk to you about the schools and what percentage were they reporting out, but we haven't been back. So any data that we gave you now wouldn't really tell who's going to meet that spring mark because we're not been in school.
Well, and the other factor at play, even when we are in school, is we only have district-wide data for all of those students 3 times a year, fall, winter, spring, but we report out to you 4 times. So this is that in between of looking at, it's not going to tell us exactly are we on track to meet our goal, but it is going to tell us of those kids we're worried about, are they progressing toward that goal? So it's the 4th reporting period that in between testing periods that's kind of odd.
Right. I'm going to spend a little bit more time looking at this, and I'm sure I'm going to have additional questions. I don't want to take up the full board's time on this, but I'm still I'm struggling a bit. So thank you.
Other board questions or discussion?
So real quick, I'm sorry.
That's
Terry,
okay.
thank you. Terry, thank you for making those points because I'm confused as well. And so I think, so these are reports that are strictly those kids that we believe will not meet the benchmark. So we know that we're monitoring their progress at this time. So that's who's in this report, not all Black males.
That's correct. These are not all Black males. These are the students that are persistently at risk, meaning they haven't met that benchmark in 2 consecutive times, or they're at risk, which means they haven't met it once. So it's like when we talked about that the progress measures cast a wide net, right? Well, here's the students that got in the net. We cast the net. Here are the students that are in the net. here are the students that the screener is indicating could be at risk, right? Persistently at risk just means that they've been at risk longer. So that they're at risk, they need an intervention, and we progress monitor that intervention to determine its effectiveness. So this is not, there are Black males that are not being progress monitored who are meeting the benchmark. They're not in this report.
Okay, and so did you ever have an opportunity where somebody wasn't in this report, but then something happened and maybe they should have been in the report?
Yes.
And so what would happen then? Like, how do you identify those kids? How are we monitoring them?
We'd be progress monitoring them in the same way. They're just not designated on the state's guidance for that, but the teacher may designate that. The teacher may determine that they need an intervention and progress monitoring, right? So they may say, well, they made it, but by one point or one percentage point, or they barely, were over the line to be at risk. So they may say, well, I'm going to progress monitor that student. So this is just the way the state has set it up and the guidance the state's given us, but other students who teachers or buildings determine that are at risk are also progress monitored.
I would also add, this is in some ways a bit of a strange measure to use for this goal. However, it was something, as Mr. Cody stated earlier, it's already in place. We have to give it, so we didn't want to add an additional measure that was given multiple times per year. But remember that FAST really is a screener, and it is designed to capture every student that is likely to not meet benchmark. So it does cast a pretty broad net. And the other thing I want to point out here is that this report, although I certainly understand it's how it can be frustrating for the board, especially this particular one, since it's not reporting out on a new, it's only reporting out on the percent of those that require intervention who are not receiving it. That's not very satisfying data. I certainly understand that, but this does help point out the power of the SMART goals. So our teachers, our elementary teachers, always feel, and this is intended to be complimentary, that there is way more to do for a lot of our kids than there's ample time to do. And what these SMART goals are doing is really helping the teacher, as well as their support system, highlight those things that are absolutely the most important. And so what gets measured gets done. And so this is an initial measure in this first year of the SMART goal. I definitely see us progressing as we move through time, that we will have a better, or let me say, a more satisfying report moving forward. But it's really important, as Noelle and Kelly have stated earlier, it's really important that we get this system in place and that everybody involved and directly involved in meeting this goal is clear on what is required, to ensure that at least that foundation is very solid in terms of the MTSS system.
Okay, thank you.
There was just a little. Oh, go ahead, Terry. Sorry.
I was just going to ask another quick question because I think I understand the importance of this data and the granular nature of it relative to a particular component of the Black male demographic. I'm wondering, though, if this going forward becomes a subset of our regular reporting so that, again, it can be seen in the broader context of all students and not just segregated, because it doesn't really give us a full flavor of what's happening within that population. So I'm wondering if this is a measure that we see, but we see it as part of the larger measurement that's happening across the entire Black male population. And again, just a thought, but I think that might help us to better understand the confluence of this information with all of the other data. So we really have a better picture of where all of the students are, as opposed to just this very small subset.
Terry, I would absolutely support that idea. And we struggled presenting this in isolation that wanted to adhere to the current schedule.
Right, because then we report out on all students being progress monitored in our next report. So it is
Gotcha.
hard to report on this.
Yeah. I think maybe once we sort of get through this cycle, we'll better understand the sequencing and we'll figure out sort of what data makes the most sense where. But I think, since this is really the first round of this, I think that's why I'm just sort of a little out of sorts on it. So.
Yeah, because I think what it sounds like is we're eventually going to see the data for all third graders on this goal. Is that
correct? And
that's coming up in May. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it might just be that when we hit this schedule next year, we just need to reverse those or something so that the board has that context going into this one. So, okay. Any other boards comment or discussion?
But yeah,
Go ahead, Rob.
There's a bit that's misleading to me, and there was a little conversation in that chat that I started there. We don't have a measure for all students in this population right now because there hasn't been a test in between the last two reports, but yet the data dashboard that we have does reflect all the students that we are trying to monitor, not just the students that are being progress monitored. All black male third grade students, all black male second grade students, all black male first grade students, all black male kindergarten students are in that dashboard, as I understand it. And I believe that is what Mary just put into the chat as well. So I just want to, I feel like we've drilled down to the point where we might be losing people on this. If you look at the report that the district gave us, it still has all of the information on all of our black male students. It just doesn't have any new information because there hasn't been a test in between this report and the last report. Is that accurate, Noelle and Kelly?
Yes, correct. The last we reported earlier on the winter data. That's the last data set that we have. We would not have another data set. We would have had one in the fourth report that we had, but we won't be having that this spring.
So with that in mind, then, so it's fair to say then that nothing, the pandemic wouldn't have changed what this report looks like. Is that right?
That is correct.
Well,
okay, so,
it possibly would have changed a bit just because there would have been more time that progress monitoring would have taken place. But yes, materially, the data points would have looked different, I guess. But you're right, Rob. That there wouldn't have been really a substantive change to what was being shared.
Okay, and so then
we're reporting out on the bottom of that report.
Yeah,
the bottom part of that dashboard.
So then, what can we expect, or what's your thinking for the fourth black male third grade reading report that we expect to receive, since we won't have new data at the top of that report?
We were just going to make stuff up. I'm kidding. No, that's Rob. That's one of about 1,000 questions that we're wrestling with right now, and I don't have a good answer to you at this point in time.
We really, other than talking about our response to data, right? The data that we had in the winter and how we're going to respond to that moving forward. We wouldn't have any new data to discuss trends or vulnerability.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, we've been having conversations with Matt about this and about like what our fourth quarter monitoring report's going to look like. As far as Dwana and I started that conversation with him after the last board meeting because we knew those questions were coming. And so he had kind of talked about wanting to dig into some action plan stuff, and Dwana and I had got thinking about it, and just for the board's benefit, we weren't sure if that was exactly where we wanted that to go. So we were going to have a more detailed conversation with him on Wednesday, and then have him prepare some stuff to kind of send out to the board of here's what we're thinking for the 4th round of monitoring for the year, and see if that's going to kind of meet what board members are wondering about. So that's just kind of an update, because I think that's where this conversation is going, is what's going to happen 4th quarter. So that just kind of catches everybody up on the conversations that Duana and I have been having with Matt. So, and I don't know if he's here. Okay.
It's totally fine. I don't expect us to know what the next couple months are going to look like. It's just always good to know. And Tom's answer is perfectly appropriate. It's okay to say, listen, we don't know yet. That's fine. But as a board, these are just the questions we're going to ask, and this is the context that I want the folks that are listening and watching this board meeting to have as well.
Right.
Thank you, Rob.
Rob, this is Terry, and I don't disagree with you. And one of the questions that I posed to the superintendent was, when we really sort of reflect on our goals and what progress monitoring and measurement means, what it looks like moving forward likely is going to be a lot different than what it looked like looking backwards. And I do think that the bigger issue for us as a board, along with the superintendent, is really being thoughtful about what realistically we should be expecting moving into next year, and then what hitting the reset button looks like, so that when we begin to monitor as it relates to accountability back to the superintendent and staff, we can all be clear and not have unrealistic expectations about what should or shouldn't be expected, and we can all comfortably be on the same page about what resetting looks like.
Okay. I just keep asking this because I can't see everybody's faces to see where the board is at for comfort. So what other questions or discussion do board members have at this time? I think that might be appropriate wait time. I'm not sure. So if there's no further discussion or question, we can go ahead and vote to accept this monitoring report. Ms. Jenkins, would you take the roll call vote, please?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Cody?
Yes.
Ms. Delagardelle?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
All right, the vote is approved 7-0. There are a couple information only items on our agenda this evening. It includes a request for open enrollment for the 2020-2021 school year. It's our report on our open enrollment, and also a notification of award of competitive quotes, which you can find there under information only. So next on the agenda, we have items of privilege, and I just want to give a couple updates to board members on some things. We're set to finalize and continue our work on our superintendent's evaluation on Thursday. I scheduled this for 5:30, but Rob, this is because I completely forgot when I had Aaron send out the doodle poll that you had asked for it to be later in the evening. Is that something that the board would want to discuss? Because I think Rob had brought that up last time. I don't know if that would still work on Thursday for folks. That was my mistake. I forgot completely till everyone got their surveys back.
I have another meeting scheduled that evening. It depends on how late you're planning to go. So I think my other meeting is at 7:30. So.
Okay. Rob, would it be okay if we do it at 5:30 for this time, and then next time, please remind me about the later time, and I'll make sure I send out the poll that way.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your flexibility. Duana and I, board members, have been continuing to do our bi-weekly updates with Dr. Ahart. Today we talked a little bit about budget, which Tom's going to give a greater update on that during our work session following the meeting. I've also had a lot of conversations with board members, and I just want to make sure that board members are getting the information and communication you'd like, especially during this time from both the board officers, but also from Dr. Ahart. So my plan is we had an update today, so Friday will be my next update. My plan is that after these conversations, I'm going to send you kind of some bulleted notes of what we discussed, and then please feel free to ask me any questions about those notes if they're not detailed enough. And I think by continuing to get those questions by email and phone, it'll help me to better craft my updates in a way that will meet board members' needs. I'm going to try to do that after agenda planning as well. So I will try to probably keep them fairly brief and bulleted so that it's for your ease of reading. But always, if you have questions, please let me know what those are. Do any other board members have any updates or comments they'd like to share? Okay, if not, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ahart for the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Kirsten. Especially in this format, I'm not sure what our actual live audience is, but I do want to express my gratitude to the Chief Medical Officer at Broad Lawns, Dr. Shaw, who visited with us. Now I'm completely at a loss as to where we are in sequence of time, but the last work session that we had, as well as David Stark, the CEO of Unity Point Health Systems, who I've been in frequent contact with both before that last meeting and since. It's been particularly difficult to navigate this situation with what feels like, in some cases, contradictory and certainly at best vague guidance from the state, and at least from my personal vantage point, an attitude by state leadership that is not taking this situation as seriously as it might. So I am indebted to both of those gentlemen for helping inform how I work with the board and how I am attempting to direct the district. Second, I want to publicly express my gratitude for, and I'm not going to start calling names because there's just too many to mention, but our transportation department has been doing work that is not their typical work. They've actually been serving almost as a FedEx or a UPS service for us as we distribute devices for connectivity to our student body, and that will continue on through next Monday or Tuesday. We should have 99% of our students fully connected. Our technology department has been really working in a very different way than what they typically do. Our Office of Schools, our Office of Academics, our operations team, everybody's work has been different, and different in substance, but different in style as well, because if everybody else is like I am really on the verge of pulling my hair out, not being able to sit around a table and parse through some of this new work that we're attempting to do. So we're all managing our lives and interfacing with one another electronically, and that has been a frustration, in addition to just the stress that all of us are under from the social isolation that we're all experiencing. So I just want to extend my gratitude to our entire staff, teachers, going that extra mile to make sure that they're connecting with students, learning the best ways that they can connect with families and students electronically. The list just goes on and on and on. And I'm just so proud of the DMPS team, from the board all the way through the organization, because I think we've really been setting the pace for the state and in some instances for the country, and how you respond to a situation like this, especially in the face of perhaps state level leadership that isn't necessarily conducive to us doing our best work. I also, and we'll be talking about this in more depth in our work session, but certainly the our 2.3% supplemental state aid this year is the second highest that we've had in 11 years, and that is not a certainty as we move forward. revenues are expected at the state level to be down, and data to actually assess what that revenue is going to look like are going to be delayed because of COVID-19. And so even when the legislature does get back eventually later this month or the beginning of next month and wraps up their session, likely that's not going to tell the whole story. Probably in 4 to 5 months, we're going to learn some more about what the actual financial outlook is. And so I say that by way of just reminding everyone that these are, in every respect, different times, and this is uncharted territory. And one of the things that we have working for us the most is a board that has provided very clear priorities, and we are being driven by those priorities. And I know that we're taking a step back, or a half step back, or maybe 2 steps back in our pursuit of the actual stated goals. But because there is clarity about where we want to focus our energy and our time and our resources, we are in a much better stead than we would have been otherwise. And I don't want our community to lose sight of that, because this board has really provided a level of clarity around what this district stands for and where our priorities lie than I would argue any other district, at least in the state. And so I want our community to not lose sight of that. I think that's all I have for tonight, Kirsten. Thank you.
Thank you. With no further business before us, the meeting is adjourned and our work session will begin here pretty much immediately. Thank you.